FiiO's relatively long list of music players has continued to consistently evolve in terms of design and quality over the last couple of years, but they've never really released what we could consider to be a super premium player. Now it seems like FiiO is wanting to take a piece of the pie in the luxury music player market, and with that comes their most premium device to date, the M15. I'll try to keep this video relatively condensed and to the point, so do check out the link in the description for the written review in which the design and a couple of other factors are discussed in a bit more depth. The M15 combines a couple of unique design elements, but also shares a few traits here and there with some of FiiO's other products, as well as taking inspiration from competing players. It's the first time that we are getting a proper volume dial rather than a clicky jog wheel. And I think FiiO did a superb job with this one. Taking a look at the headphone outputs and those gold metal surrounds gives us the first little impression that the M15 has taken some inspiration from some of Sony's more premium Walkman players. Here we are treated to both a 4.4mm and a 2.5mm balanced output, as well as a regular 3.5mm single-ended output. That Walkman vibe is carried out through other facets of the device's design too, such as the rounded sides, which are strikingly different to the sharper, more angular design of the M11 series. It's by no means a bad design to take inspiration from, but I'd kinda be lying if I didn't admit to the fact that Sony just did it better. From a usability standpoint, the buttons are somewhat difficult to operate, especially in your pocket. They aren't exactly flush with the rest of the body, but they're also not raised enough to really make it easy to have a feel for them. However, I think the biggest flaw here is that the buttons only have a very minor difference in their sizes, and there also aren't any little raised bumps or something like that to make it easier to feel which button is which. Both of those factors combined mean that operating these buttons don't feel quite as easy as physical playback buttons should. The front features a large 5.15-inch 720p display, which seems to be the same as the display used on both of the M11 variants. Having a large and good quality display might almost seem a little redundant on a portable music player, but when you're dealing with a large library size, then having decent screen real estate and a nice crisp pixel density for the text can make quite a big difference in terms of the ease of use. Speaking of the user interface, this is not something I'm going to cover since it's essentially the exact same interface that you get from FiiO's other Android-powered players, so there really isn't anything new or interesting to report on that front. On the whole, FiiO have done a pretty damn good job on the design of the M15 as they've managed to create a device which both looks and feels very premium, and it just somehow feels a little more special than FiiO's other devices. However, it really is pushing the envelope in terms of size, and what we could really consider as being a reasonably portable size. What really surprised me was when I noticed that the M15 also does not feature THX AAA amplification technology like the M11 Pro and the AM3D module for the X7 and Q5 series. This is supposedly one of, if not the most advanced headphone audio amplification tech available, so it seems a bit odd for FiiO to not include this in their most expensive device. Nevertheless, the M15 is still noteworthy for how much power it can provide and how clean it sounds. As for the specific sound character and audio quality you can expect from the M15, it's more often than not exceptionally difficult to really describe how these devices sound because players and DACs generally sound pretty much the same. That is assuming, of course, that you've taken all the reasonable steps such as properly volume matching them in order to make a fair and objective comparison. There are a few exceptions here and there whereby you can hear differences more clearly, but for the most part, the differences tend to be way less obvious than the kind of differences that you'd hear between different headphones and IEMs, almost to the point that the player itself is kind of irrelevant. It's a bit like comparing the performance of two cars based on the amount of water in the washer fluid bottle or the number of LEDs used in the brake lights. Sure, objectively those small weight differences can have an impact, but there are other factors that just have such a wildly more applicable influence. Having said that, the thing that stood out to me in particular is just how clean the audio sounded in terms of how black the background sounded. Even when swapping to the more sensitive Dunu DK3001 Pro, the M15 offers an exceptionally clean sound. Switching over to the over-ear headphone mode did make the hiss more noticeable on the 3001 Pro, but it's still not something I'd call distracting. The other characteristic I found to be a little different to what I'd normally expect from FiiO is that the M15 almost seemed a little more rolled off, but without the added warmth that you got on the old X5 3rd Gen and original Q5. And yet, despite this perceived slight treble roll-off, all of the treble details still remain perfectly clear. They are detailed and well defined. Equally, the bass control never feels even remotely sloppy. This refinement and control is what you'd expect from a device which uses top-of-the-line DAC chips along with FiiO's engineering expertise. But again, we are well and truly past the point of diminishing returns, so the apparent audio improvements we get here are exceedingly diminutive relative to the price. The real benefit, on the other hand, is that driving power. Having more power on tap, and in particular a wider voltage swing, can have a very big effect on how headphones and IEMs sound. This voltage swing is one of the key factors which determines how well an amplification circuit can handle and control the bass region, as it is precisely the bass frequencies which require the most power. It's this available power which makes the M15 just such a great and versatile device in terms of what it means with regards to giving you the freedom to adequately power some of even the most demanding headphones out there in the wild, or even some of the most sensitive ones, without running into issues of amplifier hiss. There really are very few players that have this ability, and in part that's what you're paying for here. Now, the elephant in the room is undoubtedly going to be the price tag, and at well over $1,000 it's a pretty big elephant. In reality, it's closer to around $1,300 to $1,500, depending on your region and whatever applicable taxes there are. Many people will without a doubt be asking themselves, do I really need to spend this much to get great audio? And the simple answer is just absolutely not. You can spend way less and only suffer a minute degradation in terms of objective sound quality. So when it comes to whether you should or shouldn't buy the M15, then there really is no right or wrong answer here. As long as you're not under some false pretense that the M15 will somehow unlock a brand new magical dimension to audio enjoyment or fidelity, then neither I nor anyone else could tell you that you really shouldn't buy the M15. If you do decide to spend the cash on the M15, the fact of the matter is that you do get a really well-built device which boasts top-of-the-line specs, multiple output options, and a bucket load of power to drive pretty much any headphone out there. And all of that is packed neatly into a single device. Well, that's it for this short little review on FiiO's new M15. If you've liked this review, please hit that like button. If you've disliked it, hit that dislike button twice. That's all from me for now, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.